What's going on, everyone? So many of ex-NBA players have thrown out suggestions as far as what the Lakers' starting five should be. Lamar Odom threw out starting five of LeBron James, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, and Anthony Davis. And this kind of spawned this discussion of like, do the Lakers need another starting unit change? They have been better starting games than they were earlier in the season, but they still haven't been great. The offensive output has been a real problem, right? Even the last game, not the Timberwolves game, the previous game where LeBron James and Anthony Davis both played, the first 14 points scored were all LeBron James and Anthony Davis, literally. Like, that's not good when you're talking about a team that is playing the Chicago Bulls on the road and your first 14 points are all LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Now, what I wanted to do in this video is I wanted to kind of break down the starting five as well as like some of the other pieces that could be thrown out there as replacement for the starters and kind of give my take and my thoughts on should we change the starters, can we change the starters, and like what the variables would be. Also, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions, so let me know down in the comments below, as always. And make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into it. So, obviously, LeBron James and Anthony Davis are your two main starters, right? So, two guys that aren't interchangeable. Everyone else, interchangeable for the most part. Now, here's the thing that I see a lot of people still throw out, and I mean, Darvin Ham has talked about it. LeBron has even briefly touched on it. LeBron James cannot start anywhere else but the 4 spot, right? He can operate in other ways, right? Like he could be your point guard, but as far as like the defensive side of things, he has to be the 4. So that's something you have to keep in mind. So the idea of like, you know, Jackson Hayes or Christian Wood or somebody like that starting alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis is very unlikely, simply on the fact that like LeBron has to line up at the 4 at this point. Darvin Ham talked about it in a press conference before the season started, saying, that, him and LeBron talked about like him playing the 4 and we'll see how many minutes AD has to play the 5. Like it's out there, right? Because LeBron at age 39 in year 21, you don't want him running around chasing quick, twitchy, athletic forwards, right? When he plays the 4 spot, he is able to play in that like free safety scout role and just basically plop down and kind of rest in between plays, right? He's been better this year defensively than he was, especially last year. But even this year, you'll see him completely take off defensive sequences, or you'll see him just like not even run and try to close out and put a hand up. But like when he's at the 4, he can get away with that, right? Because then he can just box out. The guy misses. Usually his defender is not a great elite 3-point shooter, so you can kind of live with it at times. And then he can kind of just be another rebounder down low to help grab defensive boards, right? But if he's playing the 3, there are no possessions off, right? And that doesn't mean that you can't have a form of like positionless type basketball where you have, like several guys that are all 6'8" or whatever in the starting lineup. You can do that, or just lineups, period. You can do that, but at least for the defensive side of things, LeBron James has to be able to play the 4. So you have to keep that in mind when you're talking about other guys. That also means AD has to be the 5, which is also why I don't think the Lakers are going to go trade for like a Vu or something like that, like some elite starting level center, because LeBron, again, is going to need to play the 4 and is going to want to play the 4, right? Maybe that changes. Maybe LeBron says, hey, you know what? If you get me a Zach LaVine or a DeMar DeRozan in a Vu or whatever, right? Like maybe I can lock down more defensively. I don't know. But at least from what has came out of LeBron and what has came out of Darvin Ham and the organization, and the reason that he has played the 4 the last few seasons is because LeBron has to. So we got to keep that in mind when we're talking about starting lineups and what could potentially be. So let's talk about D'Lo and Reeves, because I've seen a lot of people, a lot of these like, ex-players throwing out like, hey, Austin Reeves should start. I that's like the one thing that I completely disagree on. If you want to interchange anyone else, that's fine. Austin Reeves needs to stay off the bench. And the reason for that is he has shown, again, the numbers, the eye to everything backs it up, that he gives you the exact same production, if not more, off the bench than he does in the starting unit, right? Where usually what happens is guys will be starters, right? And then they'll go to the bench and they're not the same guy, right? They're not as efficient, they're not as effective, or, they just, whatever, they kind of get in their own head. It affects their game. It doesn't do that for Austin Reeves. Austin Reeves comes off the bench and he is huge for our bench production. Better than anybody else that we currently have on the roster. Now, maybe if you do some trades and you do some stuff that makes sense, right? And maybe it's like, okay, well, we're going to need Reeves in the starting unit. Maybe, okay, fine. But also defensively, he is like one of our worst defensive players on this team. Worse than D'Lo, worse than everybody, right? He has not been good on the defensive side by any stretch of the imagination, and teams are literally targeting him. And we already have issues starting games, right? Like, if teams are going to be able to torch him, but if he's coming off the bench, that sort of negates some of those problems. He's also most of the time going up against other bench units, right? Until he closes games down the stretch and stuff. But in general, right? Like Austin Reeves, you have to keep him on the bench, right? Now, as far as D'Lo goes, I do think you need to start him for the sense of just, I don't know how he would take coming off the bench. And I think you want to keep him in good spirits. You want to keep him happy. You want to keep him playing to the best of his ability right now, because I do believe the Lakers are going to trade him. And I understand that you could look at it and go, well, if you're going to trade him, who cares? Put him to the bench, bring him off the bench. But you still need to win games. You still need to be good. You still need to be competitive. And there's no guarantee that you're trading him, for one. And two, you still, again, want to showcase D'Lo. Like, D'Lo has been good in spots starting, right? He's better starting than he is coming off the bench. That we know. And you don't want to make him already at times gets in his own head and becomes a liability that could become worse, and he can always be worse. As much as people think that he can't be, he can be worse, right? And at the end of the day, like, starting and playing are two different things, right? Like, if you start and play 3 minutes, then who cares? If you come off the bench and you play 40, like, isn't that what matters, right? So, like, I prefer and would stick with D'Lo in the starting unit. If you were going to do anything, I don't hate the idea of putting D'Lo and Reeves off the bench and then going with like maybe a Gabe Vincent, or go with like maybe like a defensive matchup, or go with Christie or something like that, right? Because the problem is like, who else do you put in D'Lo's place, right? Again, Reeves is best off the bench. He has the biggest impact off the bench for the Lakers, more than anyone else. So he's got to stay on the bench. D'Lo, you could take and put to the bench. You could go with Gabe Vincent for defensive purposes, but his shooting has been atrocious. And at least D'Lo is one of the guys that really gets AD going. Like, that's something that I think gets overlooked. And just like the D'Lo hate is that he's like the only guy that regularly is looking to get Anthony Davis the basketball, and one of the best plays in all of basketball. Like, again, this is a fact. This is an opinion. One of the best plays in all of basketball is the D'Lo AD pick and roll. So I just don't know, like, who do you put in that spot? You kind of got to live with D'Lo and his, lackluster performances at times, just because you don't really have anybody that like is like a clear cut, okay, this is the guy you should start over D'Lo, just because of his playmaking. No one else is really a great shooter, right? Like, you could go bigger, right? You could go with like a Rui and stuff, but then you're talking defensive liabilities. I just think you got to keep D'Lo in the starting unit. But let's talk about Jared Vanderbilt, right? Now, as I mentioned, right, you could go and just have LeBron play point guard, go with like Torian Prince and really lean in defensively, right? So, like, for position's sake, you could have like Prince, Reddish, Vando, LeBron, and AD, and just really lean in defensively, lean in size, try to get out in transition. Problem is obviously shooting. Lakers already have slow starts offensively. The the one argument that I can think of for like to counter that is you're so bad starting games anyway offensively, and LeBron James and Anthony Davis are basically all of your offense unless Torian Prince is hot early, which he's been shooting very well, right? Like you might as well just lean in fully defensively and just be absolute clamps defensively, right? Like that, and then make the adjustments accordingly. If Darvin Ham was better at like just rotations and the leash of some of these guys, I would be completely fine with it. My biggest concern is Darvin Ham for doing something like that. Because like you have to have the awareness of like, all right, this isn't working currently. We need to interject some offense or whatever. Like if it was me, I would go and say, like, if you wanted to change the starting lineup, I look at it as like we haven't been good offensively. So let's just lean in defensively, right? Go with Prince at the point, Vando at the 2, or Reddish at the 2, Vando at the 3, LeBron at the 4, AD at the 5. Sorry, LeBron, you're going to have to play point on offense, right? You just run a ton of actions, keep a ton of ball movement. You have Reddish and Vanderbilt as just slashers, cutters. Hopefully they can hit the occasional 3. But you got Torian Prince running off of screens with Vando and Reddish, and then you're using and utilizing their athleticism to get to the rim, right? LeBron James and Anthony Davis, they do what they do. I think you can make it work. And you're just the best defensive team in the league. But you have to have the awareness of like, okay, this team is hot. Our defense isn't slowing them down enough to where it's offsetting our offense right now. And our offense isn't keeping us in the game. We need to interject some offense. So let's take out a Vando or let's take out a Reddish and throw in a Reeves or throw in a D'Lo or throw in whomever, right? Like you have to be able to kind of like, it's like you're playing, a Battleship or something, right? Like you're basically putting your pieces where they need to be, but you have to make those quick adjustments, right? Don't have too long of a leash. I mean, obviously, you want to allow things to kind of breathe a little bit, right? You don't want to like, oh, no, we're down 5-0, time to switch it up. Like, no, you got to let things breathe a little bit, but it's having that balance. And I just don't know if Darvin Ham has that balance. But right now, a couple things. One, Jared Vanderbilt is not Jared Vanderbilt right now. His timing is off. He's getting beat like regularly in games by guys that he never would have gotten beat by before, right? I mean, he had like he was defending Alex Caruso on a play, and Caruso just literally blew by him. And like you looked at him last year, there were times where he just, would gamble or whatever, or just get, kind of position wrong and just get blown by a little bit and then immediately recover. He's not recovering the way that he did. And again, this was expected. I talked about this before Vando returned, that like, hey, it's probably going to take him 10 plus games, maybe 15 games to kind of figure things out. Because usually the defensive guys usually get better as the season progresses because their timing gets better, right? Their just legs are fresher, right? Like you're in a position to where you just have the better understanding of like the players. You've watched the tape enough. Like everything is your motor is quicker, right? Your twitchy movements are better. You're disrupting passing lanes. You haven't understand. Okay, Vanderbilt's not there yet. That doesn't mean he won't get there. I fully believe and trust that he will. I just don't know if Vanderbilt is best starting right now. I just think Cam Reddish has been so good for the Lakers. I think you trust him. And yes, you could put him in over like a Torian Prince, but Torian Prince has shot the 3 ball so well. Like he's kind of like our only offense outside of Austin Reeves that has been consistent. So I just don't know if you can remove him from the starting lineup. But let's talk about Rui, right? Because a lot of people want Rui Hachimura starting. Here's the issue, biggest issue. He cannot defend the three. He can't. The Lakers have tried. Washington tried. He cannot. He doesn't have the lateral quickness to stay in front of these guys. He just doesn't. And he can't switch out on guards. He gets beat every time. He is strictly low block, defend the four, and, can switch on fives and hold his own. His offense would be great. I absolutely, the Lakers could absolutely use his offense. But the problem is you're trading offense for defense, and I don't think Rui will be utilized well enough, for one. And two, I just think with the guys that are in the starting unit, I don't think Rui would have the offensive impact that would justify it. I think on the occasion, right, especially games where his three ball's fallen, right, and he's had those games where he's hit 3 or 4 threes, when that's happening, those games, yes, absolutely. But the problem is I just don't see the Lakers putting him on the block like they should be, dumping the ball down to him and letting him go to work and just generating a bucket, or running some pick and pops with D'Lo, or doing those things. You can supplement his offense for the defense if he's going to have the offensive impact that you need to justify it. I just don't see that happening. And again, LeBron can't defend threes at this stage. I mean, he can if you absolutely need him to, but you don't want him doing that for 30 minutes a game, every game over, let's say he plays 65 games, right? You're going to end up wearing him down. He's already dealing with ankle injuries, all that stuff. That's the last thing you need. Again, if he has to switch on guys and defend in spots or on the occasion, sure, he can do that. He has shown the ability. But you don't want his defensive assignment to be, an Andrew Wiggins or a Mikal Bridges or, a Michael Porter Jr. or anything. You don't want that to be the case. Yes, he can defend those guys. If it's the end of the game and there's 2 minutes left and you need a stop, LeBron is still I fully trust LeBron to go get that stop if you need it. But again, that's in a vacuum, not over the course of the game. So now you have the defensive liability that is LeBron James. You have the defensive liability that is Rui Hachimura. You have the defensive liability that is D'Angelo Russell. Let's say you take D'Angelo Russell out of the unit. Now LeBron's playing your primary thing. Who's defending? So you're going to put what? Reddish on the point guard, or Taurean Prince on the point guard. So now Reddish and Prince are going to have to defend the guards. Rui's going to have to defend the three, which he can't. He gets beat too regularly. That's going to put so much pressure on Anthony Davis now. And now you run the risk of getting AD in foul trouble. I just don't see it. And this is why I think ultimately D'Lo and Rui will end up getting traded. As much as I love Rui, as much as I want Rui on this team long term, problem is, as long as LeBron is on this roster, he's just never going to get the real opportunity. He's just not, right? He's great when LeBron's out, right? It's not a coincidence that every time LeBron misses a game, Rui Hachimura has a good game, because he can play the four where he's best at and has the most impact on both sides of the basketball and all those things. But just to have him basically play the three, I just don't see that working. But Cam Reddish, right? Cam Reddish has been our best defensive guy. He just has. And until Jared Vanderbilt gets back to being that guy, then I don't think you can Cam Reddish might be the one untouchable in the starting unit right now, because we have no other point of attack defensive guy. If Gabe Vincent can get back into the flow of things and consistently hit the three-point shot, then I think in some matchups you could maybe say, okay, well, let's go with Gabe Vincent over Reddish. But even then, I just think his size, his length, his athleticism, right? His ability to defend multiple positions and switch on multiple positions, his hustle, right? To me, the Lakers just don't have anybody else right now that is able to replicate his impact. He's a liability on the offensive end, don't get me wrong, right? He's inconsistent shooting the three ball, right? He has his ailments. At times, he can gamble a little too much. At times, like, he can kind of be non-existent, it feels like at times. But he's had the most impact, not named LeBron James and Anthony Davis, especially on the defensive side, right? So, like, who do you put in to replace him? You can lean in heavily on the offensive side, but again, we don't have that natural score. Now, if let's say we do end up trading D'Lo and Rui for Zach LaVine, then I think you could go like LaVine, Reddish, and Vando, right? Because Zach LaVine is good enough offensively and can generate his own offense and doesn't need help, doesn't need setup, and is such a good natural scorer, can shoot over the top, athletic, can get to the rim, like, pull up, step backs. He can play off of LeBron. He's like 44% catch, shoot threes. Like, now you have enough offense to supplement, like, okay, let's lean in and have the other two guys just be solely defense. Or you can even keep Prince in the lineup, whatever you want to do, right? Like, you have options there, you have flexibility there. But right now, I just think the Lakers are very limited in who should actually start in games, right? But that also goes into like where my concerns that I mentioned earlier with Darvin Ham and his inability to make adjustments on the fly with the rotation, right? Like, could you lean in and maybe even change things like based on matchups and stuff? Sure. Problem is Darvin Ham's leash is too long at times, right? Like, D'Lo will be literally unplayable out there and he gets 38 minutes. It's like, dude, that can't happen, right? Or like Reeves will have a bad game and he gets 40 minutes. It's like, dude, that can't happen. Like, who has the hot hand? Stick with the hot hand, right? Like, I don't know. It just, times it makes things difficult. But I just think Reddish is the one guy you got to keep in the lineup right now because he's been our best defensive guy. He's our best point of attack guy. He gives us athleticism out on the perimeter, gives us size out on the perimeter. He's been rebounding well. Like, he's too impactful when we don't have anybody else. Again, if Jared Vanderbilt gets back to being Jared Vanderbilt that we know, then maybe you could put him in the starting unit because he just covers so much ground and he's much more disciplined and just has better awareness than Reddish. But right now, you got to keep Reddish in the starting lineup. And then Taurean Prince, right? Dive into Prince. Could you take Prince out of the starting lineup? Yes. Should you? No. He's been our best three-point shooter this year, our most consistent three-point shooter this year. He had a little rough stretch early, but outside of that, he's been great. And he's been hot, and he's continued hot. He had that one bad game like 2 or 3 games ago and immediately corrected it and was great. It's 4 or 4 again from 3. He's not elite defensively, but he's been good enough defensively. He's been one of our better defenders. His ability to switch on multiple guys, all of that, right? Like, Taurean Prince has been excellent for the Lakers. And you need that shooting, you need that floor spacing alongside LeBron James. You see teams are starting to glue a guy to him more, which basically takes guys out of the play, which is why I think, like, if you did do like a Zach LaVine trade or something, you keep Prince. Like, I think personally, I think, yes, you can make the argument, like I said, Vando or Reddish. I just kind of like the idea of, like, you always have Vando or Reddish on the court at all times, one of them. And it's best to do that if you have one of them coming off the bench. But I also just think Prince's three-point shooting has just been so good. So I just think you go LaVine, Prince, or Reddish, whomever position sake. But basically, LaVine, Prince, Reddish, LeBron, and AD. If Vando gets back to being Vando, like that arguably best defensive player, on-ball perimeter guy in the league, then I think I would start Vando over Reddish. Just because, again, he's better and just covers more ground. So you have Vando, whatever. We'll see how that goes. But I think you need to keep Prince in the starting unit, regardless, right? So to kind of answer the question, can the Lakers change the starting unit? Personally, right now, the way the roster is constructed, no. I don't believe the Lakers can change the starting unit. because Austin Reeves is best off the bench. D'Lo, I think, is important for Anthony Davis's early establishment. Prince has been our best three-point shooter, and we need him, especially alongside LeBron James. Cam Reddish has been our best on-ball defender out on the perimeter. That is the best starting unit right now based on the guys that we have currently and based on fit and all that stuff. The only thing that I think you could change if you wanted to would be if Gabe Vincent can show that he can be a 38%, 40% three-point shooter. Problem is he hasn't been able to show that at all this year. Before injury, he was 1 of 14 from 3. And then the one game he came back, he wasn't good for. He did hit a 3, which is good, but it wasn't like he was shooting the lights out. If Gabe Vincent can consistently go and give you, 2 or 3 threes a game, he was 1 of 3 from 3, which is 33%. If he can be like even 2 of 5 from 3 a night and go give you 6 to 8 points, then maybe you could go with him in the starting unit. Just because defensively he's better than D'Lo. Although D'Lo hasn't been as people act like D'Lo's been trash this year defensively. He actually hasn't. He's actually been very good for the Lakers. He's not great. He's not elite or anything like that, but he's been much better. He's playing the best defense he has in his entire career. But outside of that, I just don't think you could change the starting unit. At least right now. Now, again, if you go get a Levine or you go get whatever, then now you can kind of play with things because you have that just elite level scorer. The problem is the Lakers just don't have another elite level scorer is really what it boils down to. And when D'Lo's on, the starting unit looks great. But D'Lo has not been very good scoring the basketball. Now, he was great shooting the end of the Timberwolves game. So maybe that's kind of the starting point of he came around. Time will tell. We'll see. But personally, I don't think the Lakers could change the starting unit right now. I think they have to keep it intact. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. So I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Want to do this little deep dive? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down